What is up? Welcome to the American Peloton. I am Jonathan Crane. I am no longer a mediocre cat 2, or at least I won't be. I haven't submitted my points yet, but we just got back from Gateway, and I got the last points I needed for my one upgrade.
There we go. We're gonna have to figure something else out.
Yeah,
But I'm Ben, team director at Skyway Racing, which is kind of like the little upgrade factory in the southeast.
yeah. What have we got? Four. Well, I guess if you're counting guys that also went 3-2, how many upgrades do we have this year?
Four or
Me, Zach,
five.
John, Elliott going 2-1, and Ben DeJarnette going 3-2. A lot of upgrades, a lot of
Yeah,
points this year.
it's like the Boss Man D'Lo song. If you want to boss up your life, get in with me.
Yes, exactly. Although that's also not advice because we're kind of looking for guys that have already had their upgrades at this point. We're not really recruiting development as
No,
much, or at
no,
least that's the plan.
no. But the sentiment is the same. We're
Yes.
really Skyway Racing has been doing it. It's not even just me. It's the entire leadership team at the team. Really getting guys where they need to be. And
It's been a really good season. Yeah. Um, I guess that's where we start is we just got back from Gateway. So I feel like I didn't see a ton of racing. It's like I saw all of the racers, but I was doing the Cat 2 races, which is right before the women's, and then I find that like I'm sitting there in a lawn chair and the race is going by, but like I'm losing track of during the women's race, I'm trying to like find a sandwich or something, and then during the men's race, you know, packing up, changing, all that stuff. So I was seeing bits, but I've had to go back and watch the streams. Did you see more than me?
I probably saw less than you.
Yeah, maybe so.
I mean, we're about the same. I don't know. It was. I feel like I didn't watch any of the racing in person.
Right.
Um, so, which think is fine for Gateway because like the races, at least the first 2 or 3 days are so NASCAR that you kind of don't have to watch the whole race because they were kind of coming down to bunch sprints.
Yeah. The
But that last day was really interesting.
Yeah, which is not the ACC day, but I did make sure to pay a little bit closer attention on the ACC day, which is Giro de Montagna, which is Sunday. And it actually was really interesting racing, at least in the men's. I guess let's go ahead and get in. So the first couple of days, as you would expect on the men's side, in something that is a pretty fast race, rainstorm decimated it, like multiple guys on the podium. Um,
Yep.
And in the women's, Skylar Alexis pretty consistent with was it Garcia from Team 2020 that was getting in the mix there?
Marlisa, wasn't it? Because she was in the leader's
Yes.
jersey
Yeah,
until
yeah,
the last
yeah.
day.
So a little, not really an upset, but sneaking into the leader's jersey, I would say. I guess, and we'll get more into that in just a second. But yeah, so first couple of days to be expected. I think all of those pro races were like closing in on 30 miles an hour, if not more. They're all really wide. My race in the Cat 2 on Saturday, I think, was the fastest race I've ever done. We averaged 29.2, and it honestly doesn't. I've definitely done harder races. I've never done a faster race because you just never have to touch the brakes.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's not really that dangerous to let things get up the road because there are very few people on either side, men's or women's, that could do over 30 miles an hour for any, length of time solo. So it would have to be a really, really well organized break and timing it just perfectly to get any daylight.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, I mean, there was the factor of the overall race speed plus the wind. There were times where folks were getting off the front, they'd go around like one corner, get hit with a block headwind, and just immediately get reabsorbed. Um,
It seemed like the wind was dying. It was pretty windy. I was racing at like 3 p.m. every day, and it was pretty windy. And then it would die down a little bit during the women's and be even less windy during the men's race. I think once the sun goes down and it's not heating the concrete up, there's something about like, I'm not a meteorologist, but there's something that happens when the concrete's getting hot and that air's got to go somewhere. I think that's causing a lot of the wind in these not downtown, but like more urban crit environments.
Yeah, for sure. And plus, like because of the buildings, that wind has more of a like a vortex type of feel. So it's hard to tell exactly where the wind is coming from. So it could always feel like a crosswind or always feel like a headwind, whether it is or not.
Of course, I have found results somewhere, but now that it's time for us to do the show, and I am looking them up, it's taking me to this dead like one to go link. I'm sure I could find all of these results if I dig hard enough, but as we always say, race results are too hard to find, and like the results from Littleton are in on a whole different website from the results from Gateway. And that just seems to always be. It's like theoretically they are all on this. They're all linked out from this American Crit Cup website, but then they're all living on different platforms, and it's like it's just messy and hard to find results. I guess let's go ahead and get deep into the important day, the ACC day. This was the wrap up of the American Crit Cup, which I think would you say that's still the like premier series in America?
I think so. I think USA Chris did a good job this year, but ACC is the top dog.
I feel like there's been a little bit of a fall off, like American Crit Cup, and maybe it's because it was kind of the only day in town or only game in town. I mean,
Yeah,
um, there was a little bit more attention on it in the last couple of years, but this year, I don't know. It seems like it just hasn't garnered quite as much attention. I wonder. I mean, maybe that has to do with the slight fall off of Legion or whatever. Like there hasn't been the like Tiger Woods effect of like when there is one super dominant person or team or whatever, like there has been with the Williams brothers and Legion. It's just an easier like story to follow and get plugged into, and they were really good at promoting that stuff, um,
yeah.
and getting people plugged into it. And now that there's been a little bit of a regime change, which like you could maybe say that Rainstorm this year was as about as dominant as Legion in the big crits at their most dominant, but they're just a first year team with kind of a new, less developed media apparatus, maybe.
I think a lot of it comes down to like there's not any prestige in winning the American Crit Cup. Like it's cool to win it, but like we said it, I think in the last episode where I asked you point blank if you'd rather win on Crybaby Hill or win the ACC overall. And I think some of these teams are, maybe people aren't paying attention because they'd rather pay attention to the one important race, like or
Yeah.
races versus this whole series that is extremely long, kind of broken up. They're single days in part of series that are kind of disjointed.
Hmm.
Um, I think it would be better and easier to follow if it was
A little
um,
bit more compact.
compact and like the one race. So, like it's cool that Tulsa is part of ACC, but because there's 3 days in Tulsa and only one of them is ACC day, it makes it hard to follow versus having, let's say 8 individual 1 day races over eight consecutive weekends.
Yeah, there's a lot of like overlapping Venn diagrams with all of these things that are parts of multiple series and multiple days and stuff. I don't know. I feel like that has been the case in the past though with like previous incarnations of national series, and it translated better, and I'm not sure if that's because maybe like all of the racing was in one place like where you watched it, or I don't know what the narrative issue is. Maybe it's just, the competing for eyeballs with gravel, which like I don't know how many more people watch. Like I know Garmin Gravel Worlds was streamed, and I watched some of that, but yeah, I don't know. it does seem a little bit. But having said that, the actual racing itself was really good this year.
Oh,
So
for sure.
to
Yeah.
get into the nitty gritty, the men's race, they were both interesting races. I feel like the women's race was unpredictable throughout. There were a lot of people trying to throw moves up the road and a lot of action happening, but then the ending played out kind of the way we thought it would. And then the men's race was like the opposite, where there were there was not as much action and it was kind of the usual suspects like Robin Carpenter threw a solo move up the road mid race, kind of people you expect to be getting daylight, and then the ending did not play out how we thought it would at all.
No, not even close. I don't know how much I want to say right off the bat, but the ending was crazy. It was um, Preston I, Juan Arango, who was guest riding for Card Be Humble. Why can't I think of the third person in that group? Help me out, please. Was
It
it
was
Robin?
Johnny Brown,
Johnny Brown.
Johnny, no, Johnny Clark.
Johnny
I'm
Clark.
getting my
Okay,
Johnnies confused. Johnny
thank you.
Brown retired. Johnny
Yeah,
Clark.
Johnny Clark. And they had a really like that was the move that went. They had I mean, it's about out for what 10 laps roughly.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I think there were several. The Robin Carpenter move might have been off the front for longer than that move
yeah,
was, but they were in the final of the race. They kind of countered not too long after Carpenter was caught. Um,
if I recall, Preston countered Robin, and then Johnny and Juan bridged up.
I want to say it might have been the other way. Yeah, no, it was. It
It
is.
was the other way. Crap.
But it was work hard, be humble, and Johnny Clark off the front. Another work hard, be humble. It kind of felt like the field was keeping them at a what felt like maybe a safe distance.
Hmm.
Um, assuming that they were gonna just mop them up in the field sprint, and then when Preston got across, and then he basically like did a death pull with two to go, three to go, and that was enough for Arango to attack off of those two and stay away. But it was like, yeah, the math was right until you get another teammate up there. Yeah, it got really close. It was one of those things where it was like the field basically got them back, and then uh, I guess sort of sat up and lost control. I'm surprised that Rainstorm didn't have more control, but I think they had just been burned through because this was a pretty active race and
Yeah.
not as much of a like fast, super fast track as the others. Yeah, it was really unpredictable and super fun to watch on the sidelines.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks described it well by saying it was kind of like an old Athens course.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that was accurate. It kept the racing pretty active and pretty unpredictable. And I think I think a lot of folks thought it was going to be a break course, and so maybe that's where Rainstorm was like, well, we have the ACC wrapped up or however it looks, and so we're gonna back it off a little bit, maybe.
yeah, they might have been racing a little bit more defensive because none of those three that were up the road were a threat on the ACC
Yeah,
overall or the ACC sprint jersey or any of that. So
yeah,
they might have had their eyes on the two or three guys that were closer on points or whatever. I
yeah,
know that's so in the Cat 2 race, we had the jersey for the weekend, and that's kind of how we were racing it. Is we had like 3 to 5 guys that were a threat on the Omnium for the weekend, and those were the only people we were really watching for a breakaway. Otherwise, we were
yeah,
fine for a break to go. It's also hard to tell looking at a little bit of the stream footage here if you're listening to the podcast version later, but they were trying some stuff out with the stream, and I think kind of a mixed bag, but one of the things they're trying is this camera that's like a gimbal on the side of the lead car. Um, and it gives a good perspective of the breakaway, but one of the issues is when there is a breakaway, because of the depth of field, you can see who's in the breakaway pretty clearly, but the field behind is super blurry. And then there's only one stationary camera, and everyone would kind of zoom by them. And then there was a drone. So it would cut to the drone, and the drone would give you a pretty decent perspective of like how far the break was from the field because that foreshortening of the head-on shot, it can be hard to tell exactly what the gap is.
Yeah.
Um, but it was hard to tell who had control on the front of the group behind the breakaway, which is why, and we were there, but we were only seeing basically corner two every lap. So it was hard to tell if whoever was on the front when we were seeing them go by on the front of the big group was like actually pulling or if they were, you know, if there was good cooperation on the front and they were making inroads to the breakaway.
Yeah. Um, it was also just the speed of the race itself made it tough because at any point they were able to go like accelerate over the top of that hill, and the
Mm-hmm.
momentum would carry them down to the start so quickly that the group could catch a break without trying super hard. Um, just because of the momentum coming down, they would get so much more speed in the break.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really a matter of how quickly the one steep part before corner three. It was like if the group you were in hit that hard, you would take a lot of time on a group that was not hitting it as hard,
Yeah,
basically. So things could come back, and maybe that lulled the field into a false sense of security that they were going to get it back, and then Preston went all in. In the women's race, there was this rider. I believe she's from Georgia, and she is on Kingdom Elite. She was up the road in Spartanburg with Andrea Sear, but she had a really good long range attack. The women's field was a little bit thin though. There's a lot of teams kind of calling it a season or out here with reduced squads. I know LA Sweat, a lot of them are in Europe. Yeah, a lot of squads a little bit thin on the ground, so not a massive field in the women's race.
yeah, which pretty much because it wasn't a massive field, it kind of lended itself to Legion Miami in 2024, pretty much controlling everything without too much competition
Mm-hmm.
for the front. So they were, and because the Legion and Blazers women are bunch sprinters, they were kind of comfortable with letting some of these long range groups go because they felt comfortable with just their team either pulling it back or saying none of these girls on the front are competitive for the ACC overall. I'm in the leader's jersey. I'm second. I'm good. Which led for some really interesting racing and like some of these long range bombs go that looked pretty promising overall.
Yeah, the catch was made pretty late here, and it's kind of giving me flashbacks to Atlanta NCL race. If anybody, a race that is now
Yeah.
unwatchable as both the NCL and GCN Plus have folded. So you're just gonna have to take my word for it. But two small teams, including Fount, not Kingdom, but Fount put someone up the road, and they were just taking crazy amounts of points, and the big teams were just sort of looking at each other. And this was one of those times where I thought, like, is this gonna happen again? Is this gonna be another one of these things where the big teams just kind of let it go? I think I just saw we're looking at the stream. I think I just saw us our blue tint on the stream. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there eating a big Italian sandwich. This is the race that's in the Italian neighborhood. It's got the Italian flag crosswalks, one of which nearly took me out. They're notoriously a little bit slick. I hit one at
Yeah.
31 and nearly lost it, but two wheel drifted and saved it. I was all
It
right.
was impressive. That was impressive.
Yeah, the entire crowd. It was like my tires broke, and you heard everyone go "oh," and then they caught again, and everyone goes "oh."
Yeah. That was the most reaction out of any point of the entire day was that moment.
Yeah, if you want to get the crowd hyped up, just two wheel drift a corner and save it.
Right.
This is a really this. It's interesting to me the way they set up this Giro Montagna course because it puts the sprint on the downhill side, so it's like it is an insanely fast sprint, like an over 40 mile per hour sprint. Um, because you're coming downhill into it. But I guess you could flip the sprint to the other side of the course and really it would still be downhill. It's like it's kind of dips down to
It
the
would,
middle, so the finish would basically have to be at turn 3 for it not to be downhill, or you run the course backwards, which I would not be averse to running this course backwards. I think it'd probably race more interestingly that way.
yeah, I agree with that. That is the one thing I noticed with every week race, except the last day, was that every finish was downhill and incredibly high speed. And I don't know, like with rider safety being at the forefront of everyone's minds right now, how safe a 40-mile-an-hour bunch sprint is questionable.
It
But
didn't feel super safe.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, the course design seemed thoughtful, although they were using the barricades that we're now referring to as arm rippers.
yeah,
Um, they were mostly covered and they were mostly placed in a thoughtful way. I would say, but we did get through the weekend with no incidents. I mean, that could just be a factor of everyone being a little bit more thoughtful about those things after a few big incidents.
possibly. I think people were, a little bit more thoughtful about putting somebody into the barriers or in the curb. Um, it could also be just a byproduct of the courses being so wide.
Yeah,
Um, not maybe a little bit on the last day they were narrow, but it was slower. The corners were slower, whereas like on days 1 and 2, the courses were 3 or 4 lanes wide in points.
the corners. So day 4 is the most technical course. It's basically all up or all down, and there are a couple of corners that are both fast and narrow. It's what 6 corners, so it'd be like 5 and 6. It's 8
It's 8.
because it's a capital L, so it's
It
yeah.
wasn't. Yeah,
So the final 2 corners are downhill and pretty narrow, but it kind of felt to me the way people were racing it. I mean, it was people were ripping them and taking them fast, but it's almost like the corner coming off Crybaby Hill back onto that start finish straight where it's gnarly enough that people kind of respect it and like fall in line
yeah,
single file rather than trying to like come under people and take crazy lines. There's kind of like there's only a couple of ways to do it, and people are respecting that a little bit more. It does make me so. I made a whole video about the barrier situation, and one of the questions I was asking is like, what are other countries doing? And there are some better barriers out there, but then going and looking at like Belgian kermesses or even the British like the Tour Series type races, the big British crit type races.
hmm
They're using the barriers that I would consider to be the worst, the ones that are kind of like a bike rack that have the legs that stick out in a triangle. It just seems like the fields have a little bit more respect for the edge of the field, whereas in America we're just trying to push it to the absolute limit, and that's why we're like catching bars and catching. But in a competitive setting, it's like, is that always going to happen? Maybe it's because the kermesses, they're higher level races because they're in Belgium or whatever. They're harder races potentially, but is there less on the line in terms of like everyone there feels like this is not a world tour race and like yeah, I don't know. I would be interested to know. Let's find some riders that have done both and get them on the podcast.
yeah. I mean, is it also because the roads are so much narrower there that the speeds are less high? That like there's other
Yeah,
factors than just, oh well, they respect the racing is lower level, they're not putting it on the line. But is it more of like also the roads are narrower, it also rains a lot in the UK, in Britain,
and the
um,
surfaces, a lot of
are
those
very
races
slick.
have some amount of cobbles or something too.
Yeah,
That's also probably
so there's more respect. Also, like, I mean, if the road is only wide for three enough people to go in a straight line, and they're going to fall in at least single file with maybe one person coming in the inside through the corners. Whereas, like, I mean, most of the crashes that happen are on the straightaways, exiting corners 4 or 5 deep, where people were getting bumped over and then pushed off, right?
Yeah. I would be interested to hear from someone who's done both, and that's kind of got my wheels turning on like who can we ask to come on the show in the off season and talk to them about their racing experience. And there have been a lot of people. I guess that's a kind of a natural transition to something we
Yep.
wanted to talk about, which is all of the Americans racing in Europe and going to Europe. So Automatic is over there or just got back, I think. But they had a campaign where they were basically just doing kermesses, right?
Yeah. I think it was for most of August. They had some decent results. I know Davey Dawson got fourth in a break. He may be a good guy to have on because I know he's been on your show before, or like on the channel before.
Yeah, he has.
Um, Tom would also be a good one to get just because he's so crazy. But yeah, they were there most of August, racing well. I think their biggest result was that fourth with Davey. Um,
Actually, I'm gonna correct you there. I think
oh,
Kim, who we have mentioned on the program, got a win.
she win. Yeah, never
Yeah,
mind.
Balagam 2024 1.15 Nat Verwown. Yeah.
Crazy
So
race name.
yeah, yeah.
What is
I'm
SEO?
right. Maybe in Belgium that's great SEO. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, we've talked about her a lot. She won the ACC day of Toad, and that was a big breakout ride for her. I guess we didn't never explicitly said Work Hard Be Humble won the ACC day of Gateway, which was
Yes.
like talking about teams that have been like knocking on the door. I think the Automatic women's team has been like incrementally stepping up for a few years, and then to finally
Hmm.
like they won an ACC day, they won Athens with Tom, and then they won the ACC day of Toad with Kim. So huge, uh, maybe not breakout. I mean, that's a program that has consistently punched above their weight for several years, but a great year from them. And then Work Hard, Be Humble on the men's and women's side. I mean, to win an ACC day, massive, massive result from them. And they won it
Yeah.
in an awesome way. Like to have a rider in a breakaway, teammate bridge up, that teammate essentially do a lead out. Yeah, crazy, crazy win.
Also, the rumor mill is spinning, and the rumors have it that Wanarongo, who is guest riding for Work Hard Be Humble, has is now going to be on Work Hard Be Humble full time next year.
Wow.
And Wanarongo was an NCL rider.
Would you say this changes everything? To I don't know if we would go that far, but it clearly changes some things if Work Hard, Be Humble is capable. You know, we were talking about how our team has had success in terms of like getting upgrades and elevating riders, but I think Work Hard, Be Humble. It's important to point out that they're not just doing the thing of like recruiting better and better riders. Like they have guys who I would say Preston I was kind of like a local, I mean, good local racer in the
Yeah.
Southeast, but he has really stepped up to be like an actual factor in these races. And same with Caleb Landgrebe, a guy
Hmm.
that I've been racing with. You know, he was racing for that DDP junior team for many years, but like uh, Work Hard, Be Humble has taken people and just elevated them year over year. And they now that they brought on that whole Atlanta Rise women's team, basically, I think they're going to do the same thing on the women's side. I think we're going to see the women's side of that team step up a level next year.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was interesting you pointed out was that they are now part of the Williams Racing Development umbrella.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that talked about much, but I noticed it on the kits.
Yeah.
Uh,
I saw it on the kits this weekend. So,
yeah, I was racing with some of them at Dalton, Georgia, the Georgia State Championship the week before, and then with some of them also at the Music City Crits up in Nashville. And yeah, sneakily they got the Williams Racing Devo in there. Although maybe that's apocryphal. I don't know. It hasn't been talked about much, and I know the NCL team kits still say NCL. They didn't reprint their kits,
yeah.
so
Nope.
if you look at a Mike Spikes kit, it's still got an NCL logo on it.
But I do find that I'm wondering what that means for them. Maybe that was the pathway to funding the women's squad. I'm not sure because the
Yeah, it could
timeline
be.
kind of checks out because they absorbed them, then said, "Hey, we need some funding," and then 2 months later, which is your kit order lead time,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yep.
a new logo.
Maybe, and we haven't heard anything about CRIT, the like Williams Racing Devo series or race or whatever Lions Den sort of next step thing this year. So maybe they're trying to build a stable of some of these teams that are, knocking on the door of ACC,
Mm-hmm.
or even I think, work hard, be humble. They knocked on the door and then they opened it
Yep.
this season, but getting some of those teams in their ecosystem so that they can do something with that idea in the future. Um, I guess while we're talking Williams Racing Devo ecosystem, and before we totally wrap up Gateway, we got to talk about the day four controversy, right? So,
Yep.
day four in the sprint, Garcia has the jersey for the overall, and in the sprint in the final, she was relegated for moving left on Sky Schneider. And so we're looking at a post from Team 2024. If you want to see it, if you're listening to the audio, go to the Team 2024 Instagram. And it's pretty clear. Basically, they were protested. They asked to see the drone footage and they weren't allowed to. I guess they got some drone footage later. This day wasn't streamed, was it? Am I crazy? Is there a stream somewhere I couldn't find?
No, the only thing that streamed is the Holloway cam in the men's race.
Okay, I did watch that. Man, brutal men's race. Holloway gets dropped probably 30 minutes in, and then streams from the sidelines. But I do appreciate the content. So in the
Yep.
women's race, Alexis Magner far and away wins the last corner and wins the sprint. It's an uphill sprint to the line, but behind her you've got Garcia, who it throws me off the kit that she's in is it's more white than I would think it is because I'm pretty sure she's in the leader's jersey for the weekend, and that's why
Yes.
this right here doesn't look like the Team 2024 kit from the air. And then Skylar Schneider behind her. Garcia does move left a little bit, but it's not a. I think the general consensus here is that this was maybe not relegation worthy. While she didn't hold a perfectly straight line, uh, she moved a few feet left over the course of the last 200 meters, and it wasn't a sharp deviation. Remembering back to some of the other deviations we've had, we read the actual rule, and I think it's written as you get relegated for a sudden deviation that is meant to slow another rider down, and it doesn't look like she fully shut the door there either. Like she doesn't take her all the way to the barricades. Not that you should have to be relegated, but it's neither a
Well,
fast lateral move nor all the way to the barricades.
so the thing that stuck out to me and my reason why it's not a relegate like shouldn't have been relegated
Mm-hmm.
is because towards the end of the sprint, she actually cuts back right, further away from the barriers, and in theory would give Sky more room to come over the top. And so any argument that you could make for this would be impeding or intended to slow another rider goes out the window when she goes the other direction.
Right. It looks like she maybe even notices what's going on. So it looks to me like they come out of the last corner and then the barricades actually, they bow out to give you a little more room to exit the corner and then they bow back in. And I think just from trying to avoid those barricades, she's sort of moving left, tacking left a little bit. She's also getting around. I'm not sure who this rider is that ends up in fourth, but she is moving left to get around that rider, not necessarily to shut the door on Sky behind her.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this footage a few times, and there's actually no point in here where she does the check over the left shoulder and sees Sky. I think a lot of times when you get a sprint deviation relegation, there's a pretty clear point where the rider who is relegated looks and sees someone and then moves in their direction to shut the
Yep.
door, but she never does that in this sprint. Yeah, she does move left, but it looks like just kind of a natural continuation of the move she was doing.
Her momentum was going left, and she was just going with the momentum. Like it wasn't, this is like, hey, this is like, in theory, this is the line that I'm taking, right? And it's slightly left versus like entirely shutting the door or trying to impede Sky at all.
Yeah, it didn't look that intentional and it didn't look that egregious. And I guess the real you would think like we're relegating someone for second. What does that matter? But it cost Garcia and 2024 the overall in the Omnium for the weekend, which, um, as we were saying, it's like who's tracking who wins the Omnium versus who wins ACC versus who wins each of these individual days. I think there was some money attached to that also, though.
Probably so, yeah. And so you're like, I, it's frustrating. I feel like the protest honestly was just a little bit of sore losing. Um,
Yeah, it didn't seem to me. I mean, ultimately this is the thing. It didn't seem to me like Sky had enough momentum to come around. It wasn't one of those sprints where she had it and then she had to check up. Like it seemed like
there was never a point where her front wheel ever crossed Marlise Garcia's back wheel. Like she just couldn't match the speed.
yeah, it didn't seem like she had it. Um I guess you wanna while we're on her, we want to move on to the rumor mill.
Yeah, let's talk rumors.
So the rumor mill was churning at Gateway as it often is, and one of the rumors is that Schneider is going to Europe.
That is correct. So apparently she was supposed to go last year on EF, and that kind of fell through. But I don't know. There's no confirmation on if it's EF. I presume it is because I know she had turned down an SD Works offer at some point. Um,
After
so
some of the
we'll
stuff we
see.
saw at it was SD Works that left their leader for dead at Tour de France Femmes, right?
That
So
is,
maybe
mhm.
maybe that was a good call. Not
Yeah.
I mean, SD Works wins everything, but if you want some support, maybe don't go to the team that's
They're kind of like the quick step of the women's squad.
right, right. Well, they're like the Quick Step of like 3 years ago when Quick Step was still actually good. Like
Yeah,
they're actually good, but they're gonna, like Patrick Lefebvre he's gonna talk badly about you and potentially, your Mark Cavendish, and he's not gonna let you go to the tour or whatever. Just
right.
bonehead decisions
Yep.
that are not the best for their riders. Another in the transfer market news, Tyler Stites from Project Echelon, another team that has done a big European campaign, and I guess I want to tell everyone on Reddit to shut up because they're always talking about how like all these American races are bad and these teams are bad and they would all get smoked in Europe. And first of all these riders were talking about Schneider potentially, but definitely Tyler Stites going to Europe. We had a rider go from NCL to Europe last year, but also Project Echelon, great rides at Vuelta Portugal. Um,
Hmm.
really solid rides, and they are and Volta Portugal is a slightly smaller race, but you know, definitely a higher level than the American
So
racing.
Volta Portugal is basically like Portugal's national highest level race. And so like all the best people in Portugal and the kind of the surrounding region go.
Hmm.
Obviously not World Tour, things like that, but
But
on
they're at
their
Tour of Britain
level,
now, so
yes.
if you want to see Project Echelon mixing it up with the best of the best, they're at Tour of Britain right now, which is not a World Tour race, but it is a race that World Tour teams are at. So like Tom Pidcock is there, like it doesn't get much higher level. The ceiling of that race is as high as it gets. It's just a bigger, when it's all a World Tour race, the ceiling and the floor are a lot closer.
The,
When
the,
it's
the skill gap is big.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
the ceiling is maxed out. It doesn't get
Yeah.
any higher than Tom Pidcock is in the race.
Yeah.
Um, and they've had riders in the break. They've had You were saying they've had a couple of good results, right? A couple of top tens, or Hugo Scala
Yeah,
Jr.'s been in the top 20.
yeah. So Hugo Scala has been consistently in and around the top 20. Um,
And Cade Bickmore had like an eighth, I think.
13th.
13th.
So
Lucky
Cade,
13.
yeah. So I mean, it was stage four. Cade had a 13th on, and then Hugo Scala's been in and around the top 20 every single day. I think there was the first day he wasn't, and that's primarily why he's not in the top 20 on GC.
Yeah.
But they're not getting mollywopped out there.
Right. They're in the races. They got guys in the breakaways every day, and they're not like these are not for show breakaways like in a grand tour. These are hard,
Yeah,
long, hard days. Yeah. Anyway, Project Echelon consistently stepping up a slight level every year. I do think them uh, losing Stites is going to maybe open up the domestic stage race scene a little bit next year. It's kind of
if
been a foregone conclusion that he's the man to beat this year.
yeah, is there going to be a domestic stage race scene?
Yeah, I guess let's get into another thing that I want to admonish Reddit about. Some of the absolute psychos on Reddit, anytime I'm talking about American racing, will always say like, "We got to bring back the only thing that's going to save American racing is bringing back Tour of California or bringing back Tour of Utah." And I don't like that is the most insane idea to me. Those I would love if that was an option. If there was a bunch of stage racing, I'm not against it, but I'm recognizing the reality of the sponsorship landscape, which across all of sports is shrinking right now,
Yeah.
but especially in cycling, and then recognizing the reality that stage races are much more expensive to put on, but like time, labor intensive, and then there are less there's less opportunity to actually like engage with people there, like versus a crit which you can put on in an urban center and lots of people are just naturally going to be able to get to it easily. So when you have a race that is harder to get people to view it live, the only way to get impressions and value to the sponsors is to broadcast it. And traditional broadcast of a stage race is like exponentially more expensive and less possible to do than broadcasting a crit.
Well, the thing is, it didn't work the first time. Otherwise, it would still exist.
Yeah,
So
the
why are we
definition of
trying?
insanity is
Yeah,
to expect
right.
different results doing the same thing.
Right. So why are we going to do the same thing we already tried and failed,
Hmm.
and then say, "Oh, it's going to work this time"?
I agree. Yeah, like what nothing and people will say like, "Oh, well those were on TV." I have a sneaking suspicion that all of the people that like to say this on the internet are 50 plus years old and they're still primarily watching TV on cable TV.
Yep.
Like their understanding of what makes a sporting event important is still tied to like more traditional media style metrics.
Yeah.
And I commiserate with the fact that like the results are hard to find, the streams are in different places and they're hard to find for the crit races, but I see an opportunity in the fact that like if CBR can produce streams that are like a little sterile or whatever, but they do it and you can follow the race, you can watch it and follow their race. Like the barrier to entry is so much lower, which is good, and the opportunity to like get the product out is there when
Yeah.
there are no big institutional sponsors that are going to put these things on TV.
Right.
And no one's watching traditional TV. So that's just not that's looking backwards, not looking forwards,
Yeah.
I think.
There's also like you have to think about it. Also, attention spans are increasingly short.
Hmm.
Like you're a communications major, and so is I, and so you probably had to do some level of like video production,
Hmm.
at least for your major. And what do they say? It's like when you're doing a video or TV, like the camera angle has to change every 1 to 3 seconds, or you will lose audience attention.
Yeah.
So
Speaking of
like,
which, I'm
yeah,
just gonna cycle through.
yeah. So it's like why like if you think about it in a 6 hour stage race, the attention span doesn't exist for that anymore.
Right.
Whereas like, hey, even an hour long crit, half the time folks are like, okay, I'll watch the last half. Like
No
it's
one
so
no one can articulate to me, the people making this argument, why a stage race is inherently more prestigious or important, or it's only because when I started cycling, that's what people said was important. But there's no like
mhm.
inherent reason that it is that way. And I think that's my point, is just that I can imagine a different world.
Are we just wrong? Like you and I are both like against the grain people. Like that's how we're wired.
Yeah,
Like
that's
are
true.
you and I just like, oh, you're saying this,
Yeah,
I'm going to go the other way. Like that's
I
how you and I are wired. So maybe it could be that everyone else is right.
I also don't think that there's like an there's not a predetermined answer. It's not like
Yeah.
cycling is just naturally going to go toward, or American cycling is naturally going to go toward criteriums and those are going to flourish. It's like it depends what we do with it. And I think that's
Yep.
why my point, I don't see a path for stage racing because I don't see the sponsors. If someone can point
Yep.
me to it's like a level of sponsor that would give us the, not us like you and I, but us the sport, us
Right.
cyclists, the type of support we need to put on a tour of Utah or a tour of California at the scale that it had been before. I would welcome that, but I don't see those, that doesn't exist anymore, which is why they went away. So I'm kind of like looking at the landscape that exists and trying to see what opportunity is there.
But it's also like, okay, the reason why that model was so unsuccessful and everything went away
Hmm.
all of a sudden is because you're taking like, oh, let me get this big angel investor in here. They're going to drop millions of dollars.
Hmm.
One day they just wake up and go, I don't want to give you $1 million this year.
Hmm.
And then all of it goes away. But if your production costs $50,000, there are local businesses who can give you
Exactly.
5,000, right? 10,000, so on, and you can nickel and dime it there. And it's
Hmm.
easier to build and maintain that relationship to where then you just end up essentially just being on the payroll. They just go, oh, we always give so and so $5,000 every year. We're just going to keep doing it because it's what we always do.
This is another like floor ceiling discussion where we're talking about like the floor for crit racing is so much lower in terms of like the bar you have to clear to get the race done and to get the race
Hmm.
out there, like to make it where people can watch it, is so low. But there's no reason that the ceiling is not like, if we were getting riders that people cared about and stories that people care, like there's no reason that crit racing can't be as popular as Tour of Cal, like other than the fact that there are not mass audiences watching traditional TV the way they were in the, like, the Tour de France on outside network
Right.
days, or what was
Well,
that called, this the outdoor sporting network that used to
oh,
broadcast all the cycling.
it's what NBC Sports is now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Olympic Channel.
But like,
Yeah.
other than the fact that just there's not a mass audience doing that for anything. I think
Yeah.
even like the NBA recognized this in recent years, and there's a period of like 5 years there where the NBA was like basically foregoing their rights and licenses on everything and just saying like, if you want to use our clips on TikTok, just go crazy. Like everybody can just do whatever with this that they want, and it got them much more engagement.
Yep.
But yeah, I just think that it's more
It's
sustainable because that floor is lower, but there's no reason that the ceiling can't go as high as it wants to go.
which is like why like cycling because no one's watching TV anymore, it's harder to accidentally stumble across something because everything is so
Yes.
algorithm heavy.
Yes.
that is taking, like, my Facebook feed is like nothing I actually want to see because it's
Mm-hmm.
taking. I've had Facebook for 20 years, 15 years at this
Mm-hmm.
point. Everything I've ever looked at and how much time I've looked at any one given post, and now it's just sending me whatever. And so it's harder to accidentally stumble across things. That's where like the cycling endemic brands and companies, or even the races, with like, have to get smarter with SEO keywords and make it easier to accidentally stumble across, which is
Mm-hmm.
why a YouTube is so important to get things on.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I think everyone is looking for the one thing they can do to like fix it. But I think in terms of the broadcast portion, there's like getting something. I don't think it's even that the production quality has to be super like slick or like polished. It's just that
Yeah.
you have to be able to follow the race. You have to be able to
Yep.
see and hear what's going on and have it like understandable, compelling images is like
Like,
all you need.
yeah.
And once you have that, you can just blast it out everywhere. Every platform has a live function and the same. We're not dealing with TV rights where like one network buys it and then they don't want you to show it anywhere. If you're the race promoter or the series promoter, put that thing everywhere. Put it on YouTube,
Yep.
put it on Twitch, let bicycling.com embed it on their homepage. Uh, Put it on Instagram live and make people turn their phones this way. Like
Yep.
again, the ceiling you can just keep putting it more and more places, and there are eyeballs. That's like what people are already looking at. So like you're saying, you're just gonna catch people that way.
Yep. Because like as of right now, you have to like intentionally look for everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not the best. Like, you're not growing the sport at that point because you're just finding people who want to watch it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's even gotten harder for those people. Like in years
Yep.
when GCN Plus was there, I'm worried about cyclocross this year because there are
Ooh.
few. Okay, cyclocross is a really mixed bag because there's no GCN Plus. I think we were getting a lot of cyclocross viewership just because people who paid for GCN Plus would log on and say what race is happening, and it was cyclocross, and they would watch it. And it's
Yeah.
fun to watch. It's short. You know, it's compelling to watch Matthew Vanderpool just absolutely rip a course. Um, there are less streams this year. I'm worried about it from that perspective of like it's going to be really hard to find the few races that are streamed. They're going to be on some weird European thing. Um,
Well, it's going to go back to 2018. Everyone's going to go back to Tiz.
yeah, I hope so. But that's even like an even smaller segment of the
Oh, for
cycling
sure.
audience than the GCN Plus thing.
Well,
But cyclocross is going to be in the next Winter Olympics. So I actually think from a like funding and
yeah.
my hope is that in America, I think we may see a resurgence of cyclocross. Probably not this year, but in the next four, because a lot of capable high school mountain bike athletes are going to recognize that cyclocross could be a medal potential, an Olympics route, and
Yeah.
get plugged into it that way.
I think you're right. I think it will, but I think also from the perspective of like so many of these kids, like gravel is like the main thing in America right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these kids are looking that route, but no one wants to let no one wants to ride 200 miles in one day all the time or train
There's
40 hours a week to
yeah.
do it. And cross is like the antithesis of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can be really good at cross on 10 to 12 hours a week and get there, and then it's less daunting. And then you have the Olympics involved, so now maybe there's a little bit more sponsor opportunity. I think we will see over the course of the next couple of years true growth in cyclocross, and maybe a little bit of back pedaling on the gravel just a hair.
Yeah, I think the good news is that everybody bought a gravel bike, and most of them double as like the Cannondale one
Yep.
is a gravel slash cross bike now. The
Yep.
Specialized Crux is a gravel slash cross bike. So there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, I know some athletes kind of locally that like did an Unbound and it just completely shelled them, and they put their bike away for a long time.
Hmm.
Because those races are just they're so long and so daunting. But now you have a bike that you could do cross on, whereas 10 years ago there were a lot of people that were especially roadies who would look at cross and just go, I don't want to buy a different bike to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it'll come back a little bit because it's just sustainability. I think the peak of gravel kind of hit at a really good time when COVID was happening and people suddenly had time where they
Mm-hmm.
no longer had it. And now, businesses are getting more aggressively come back to the office, come back and work your 40, 50 hours a week if
Mm-hmm.
like you are an entry level employee. Otherwise, you're working 70, 80 hours a week. And then it's like people are going to find they don't have the time for gravel anymore. And it's going to be more of a professional only type of sport.
Yeah, I think 1 hour races are coming back.
Yeah.
Crits and cross. Well, we're gonna do a like full like sort of season recap, maybe the same format as we did last year. We might switch it up in the future, and I'm looking to line up a few interviews with some of the people, have them come on the show, some of the people we've been talking about, and a few other people who could maybe speak to a few of the things that we have been speculating on in the future. Oh, there's one more rumor we got to get to, which is Matt Kendall Ryan potentially going to Europe next year.
That is a rumor.
In the rumor mill, we got to keep the rumor mill churning.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll keep our eyes on that, and then we will have a season wrap up. I imagine we're probably about to start getting into some silly season transfer stuff as well.
There.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we will be looking to do that. You got anything else for this edition?
No, that wraps it up. Be on the lookout for a really fun, silly season episode and a season recap. I think it might be fun to do a season recap where we just like the national races and
Mm.
like rank those out.
The
I don't
races
know.
themselves, like as
Yeah.
we can talk about this offline, but like the racing product, like as something to watch, or the
The overall package.
okay.
So teams, product, stream, no stream.
Yeah, let's do okay. Last year we did a tier list of teams. Maybe we do a tier list of events this year.
Yeah.
That sounds good. All right, you guys be on the lookout for that. Please, share the show with anybody that you think wants to hear about American racing, and watch the YouTube channel if you want to see me get sixth at Gateway Montana and and close out my points for the Cat One.
There
That
we
video is
go.
coming out Thursday, so